What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie Lee. Here's a quick synopsis. Model-turned-photographer Lee Miller becomes a war correspondent for Vogue during World War II. The film stars Kate Winslet, Andy Samberg, Alexander Skarsgård, Marion Cotillard, Andrea Riseborough, Noémie Merlant, and Josh O'Connor. Standout performances. Kate Winslet has given 3 of my favorite performances on film, and they weren't in Titanic, the most popular film of her career, or The Reader, the film for which she won an Oscar for Best Actress. They are Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where she plays Clementine, who is trying to erase the memory of her ex Joel, played brilliantly by Jim Carrey. Some like to label that character a manic pixie dream girl. To give you some context, it's a term invented in 2007 by Nathan Rabin, a former writer for the AV Club, and its definition, according to him, is a character who exists solely in the fevered imaginations of sensitive writer-directors to teach broodingly soulful young men to embrace life and its infinite mysteries and adventures. She's way more than that and way more complicated. For me, it's the best performance of Winslet's career. It's the one she should have won the Oscar for. Next is Finding Neverland, the movie about how J.M. Barrie was inspired by a family to come up with Peter Pan. In the film, Winslet plays Sylvia Davis. I love thinking about and seeing how real life inspires storytelling. Winslet plays this bedridden character with tons of energy. Her reaction to Barrie putting on the play while she's sick has always stayed with me. Both Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Finding Neverland came out in 2004. What a great year for Winslet. And the third and final performance is in Steve Jobs, where Winslet plays Joanna Hoffman, who's Jobs' closest confidant. She's great throughout the movie, but for me, she's especially fantastic during the film's second segment, which is the opening of the NXT computer. I love the moment where she finds out Steve Jobs' plan to get back to Apple. Some of you may disagree with me, but I don't think that Winslet's been better than she's been in those 3 movies. Getting into Lee, Winslet plays Lee Miller, which is the perfect person for her to play in a biopic. Miller is portrayed as someone who wanted to contribute to society during World War II. She's also a big personality, which is ideal for a movie star like Winslet. Miller, as a photographer, is someone who really wanted to humanize her subjects. The movie is built around the strengths of Winslet as a performer, and I'm someone who never finds her disinteresting on screen. Winslet told Jack Davidson of the New York Times, "Women who take risk interest her," and you can see that throughout her entire filmography. When it comes to every former SNL cast member, it's always treated like a big deal when they attempt to do dramatic work on screen. Bill Murray in Lost in Translation, Adam Sandler in Punch Drunk Love, Eddie Murphy in Dreamgirls, Will Forte in Nebraska, and both Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig in The Skeleton Twins. Andy Samberg in Lee is an interesting case because he's such a silly comedian with Hot Rod and Pop Star Never Stop Stopping, still a criminally underrated comedy, and of course the sitcom Brooklyn Nine-Nine. His best acting performance to date is in Palm Springs, which is a funny movie with some deep themes. In Lee, he plays photojournalist David Sherman, and I found it to be a shaky start for him in the movie. The accent had me taken aback, and the entrance was lazy, but I got to say he got better as the movie goes, and my take is he's solid in the film, despite the fact that the movie has zero interest in giving you necessary character background. The other examples of SNL members I mentioned were given leading roles. Samberg is supporting in this movie in a way that doesn't do him any favors. It's not the showcase those others were given to prove they were more than comedic actors. And finally, Marion Cotillard is a great actress. She's an Oscar winner, has been in 2 Christopher Nolan films, Inception and The Dark Knight Rises. So when I first saw her in the film, I was underwhelmed by what she was given to do in the early scenes. She was good. I just thought there must be more here to get this caliber caliber of actress to play this part, and man was I right. It's her scene in the second half of the film that blew me away. She just has an innate ability to make you feel like she's been through real traumatic events. In the film, she plays Solange, a close friend of Miller's whose life is majorly impacted by the war. Her moment was the only moment in the film where I went, wow, somebody is taking this movie away from Kate Winslet. Somebody is being more interesting than Kate Winslet. And I think that's by design of the movie. I mean, this is a movie that clearly only cares about Lee Miller. I think the other actors who are very good, Alexander Skarsgård, Andrea Riseborough, are not given a whole lot to do. They are just there to serve Lee's story. A very fair critique of this movie is that it follows a lot of tropes of what we all agree are typical biopics. For instance, there's a journalistic character played by Josh O'Connor who is interviewing Lee throughout the movie. We of course have seen this narrative device in Chaplin, where Anthony Hopkins plays a character interviewing Charlie Chaplin, and Billy Crudup plays a character interviewing Jackie Kennedy in Jackie. What's interesting about Lee is that it uses this standard character to take a big swing at the end that to me did not ultimately work. It kind of felt like the movie just wanted to do something different for different sakes. I find that this movie is at its best when it's just being a good old-fashioned traditional biopic, and one of the reasons for that is because the person the movie is about is interesting enough to carry an entire movie. I had this realization watching Lee. The thing that I struggle with a biopic is its sole obsession with its main character. Usually these movies are a showcase for one particular actor and everyone else is just background fodder, and that's why to me the great biopics are the ones that develop the supporting players in a meaningful way. That's why I was impressed by Sandberg in Lee, because in my eyes he made something out of nothing. The scene where his character David meets Lee is the ultimate rush job. Lee Miller is without a doubt strong enough subject for a biopic, and she's given a fair amount of space for her story. Unfortunately, the other figures in the movie are not. And I don't think it has anything to do with lack of screen time. I just think it has to do with the movie just doesn't do a good enough job of explaining the importance of these people on Lee Miller's life. So for instance, the scene where Winslet's Miller meets David Sherman for the first time, Winslet is doing voiceover, describes the meeting, and then all of a sudden I'm supposed to buy into the fact that these two are now lifelong friends and colleagues. All I'm asking for the movie is to give me a scene that shows the two characters connecting in a real and meaningful way, and sadly, the movie never gave you that. It just says, oh, this is this guy, he's now a very important part of her life, he's going to be in the movie now. It also, in my opinion, does this film no favors that it came out the same year as Alex Garland's Civil War, which in a lot of ways does everything this film is attempting to do, but better. Both are trying to capture how harrowing war is. In it, Duns's character is named Lee, which is mentioned in the movie. That movie was able to say way more about the profession of war photography, which is interesting because it's a piece of fiction and this movie is based on real life events. It's probably not fair to compare the two, but impossible not to. Don't get me wrong, there are interesting elements in this movie. One of them is the fact that Vogue does not want to publish many of Lee's work. I found that to be really interesting, and it makes a whole lot of sense that a publication would not want to show the dark sides of World War II. And the scenes where Miller is having a breakdown because they won't publish the photos are heartbreaking, and Winslet is doing tremendous work in those scenes in particular. Another thing that this movie captures that I don't see a lot in movies that take place during World War II is the confusion element. I mean, the characters in the movie do not know what is going on. Like, the world was a very different place back then. They were not up to date on what was happening to their friends. There was real confusion. There was real chaos. And there's a scene where Miller is seeing people celebrating the fact that the war is no longer in Paris, but she still has an unsettling feeling about it. She knows that something else is up, and she knows that the war is not really over yet. So this is something that I wanted to talk about. There's a cynic in me who thinks part of the reason this movie exists is to get Winslet Winslet another Oscar nomination, and I don't think that comes from her. It's just how a biopic gets marketed as a movie with a great singular performance, and I have a feeling there are others who think that way as well, and it was a more effective strategy in the 2000s, but now due to the internet and the fact that we are all jaded, so even if the film has the best of intentions, some are going to feel a certain way about it. There was absolutely no Oscar buzz for Winslet, and for as good as I think she is in the movie, I don't think it's one of her top tier Oscar performances. Why do I even bring that up? Because I think there are people out there, movie fans, who won't even watch a biopic like this because they think that that's what the movie is, that it's just there for Kate Winslet to give a great performance and then nothing else. It's almost like unless the word of a mouth for a movie like Lee is that it's doing something so different than other biopics, that so many people are going to be turned off because they've already seen these kinds of movies. I mean, we've all grown up with these kinds of movies, and there are great versions of these movies. I like the biopic. I like the fact that Kate Winslet has the opportunity to play someone like Lee Miller. I did not know a lot about Lee Miller coming into this movie, so I do find a movie like this to be informative and entertaining as well. But I really do believe that biopics have a bad reputation lately. Even the ones that are deemed successful, A Complete Unknown has a chance to win the Best Picture, yet some people look at that movie and go, oh, just another biopic. Oh, Timothée Chalamet is going to win the Oscar because he's playing Bob Dylan. I do in a way feel bad for the actors involved in any biopic because the perception is they're just chasing awards, which I do not necessarily think is the case. Yes, do I think that Kate Winslet deep down wanted to win an Oscar for playing Lee Miller? Yes, but I also think that she was probably super invested in learning more about this historical figure and making a really good movie about someone who she deemed worthy. The movie has good intentions, but then all of the critics are just going to say it's a formulaic biopic, which I don't think is fair at the end of the day, even though, again, I am annoyed by some of the tropes that the movie is following, but I also think the movie is at its best when it is following those tropes. When the movie is trying to do something different than every other biopic is when I'm like, what exactly are we doing here? What was the purpose of that ending that the movie goes with? It's so wild, it's just out of nowhere, and I think it's completely unnecessary. The biggest problem I have with this movie is that it tries to reduce down its secondary characters into moments. They do not feel like fully fledged human beings. They just tell you who these people were in Miller's life, and you just have to go with that. Oh, this is who her love interest is. This is who her boss is. This is who her best friend is. There's no moments that show you that there's a real connection between Miller and these other people. Yes, it shows you that she has a real connection with her work and that she's good at it and she has a real calling when it comes to World War II, but it fails in the depiction of her relationships with other characters. One of the biggest strengths of James Mangold's A Complete Unknown is that the movie is about how the other characters feel about Bob Dylan. I don't know how David Sherman actually felt about Lee Miller as a human being, other than the fact that the movie tells me that they were best friends. What I really wanted is for this movie to show me, not to tell me. I always think it's interesting to speak on why I wanted to talk about this movie on this podcast. Well, one of the reasons is Kate Winslet. I saw, oh, there's a Kate Winslet movie out that absolutely no one is talking about. Like, what is this movie? And then I read up on it. I saw that she was starring as famed war photographer Lee Miller. I thought that was an interesting subject. I don't know anything about that person. I want to see what this movie's about. And then I looked at the cast. Andy Samberg, Alexander Skarsgård, Marion Cotillard, Andrea Riseborough. I was like, this movie has a really stacked cast. This movie to me has moments where they use the cast well, but at the end of the day, it doesn't ultimately come together. Like I said, that Marion Cotillard moment, I think is the moment of the movie. She brings a real raw energy to that scene. So one thing that I've done a lot on this very podcast is talk about the fact that I think one way to improve biopics that I think are flawed is to reduce the time period that they're in, like hone in on one specific moment in time. I actually really don't feel that way about this movie. I think you could have made the exact same movie that they made with Lee, and all you had to do to make me think it was a great movie was to care more about the secondary characters. Like, give Andy Samberg more to do. Show me why Andy Samberg is a special performer. Give Andrea Riseborough more to do than answer the phone. I mean, yeah, I could do without the scenes where Winslet is playing an older Lee Miller with Josh O'Connor's character. We could remove them from the film entirely and it wouldn't bother me whatsoever. But I don't think that that is the failure of the film. The failure of the movie to me is only caring about Lee Miller. And I get it. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to make a movie about this person's life and show us why she was a special human being who was good at something. But I actually think it reveals more about the character when you show her other relationships with other human beings. Biopics are not a problem. There are many biopics that I love. The problem is when they only hone in on the main character and they treat the other characters like they're just there to inspire the main character. I feel like I'm rambling on about this, so let me simplify it. The best biopics to me are not the ones that have one great performance. They are the ones that are filled with a lot of performances where each and every character has a real purpose to what they are doing in the movie. And the ones that fully explain the other character's relationship to the titular character that the movie is about. I fully understand and I empathize with the fact that they wanted to make a movie about Lee Miller and that's what you wanted to do. And look, you got there, but the other characters matter. I feel like the outside looking in perspective on these movies is, wow, there's only one performer really doing great work. Like Kate Winslet is the only one bringing it in a movie like this. And I look at it like she's the only one given anything to do that's interesting in the movie whatsoever. Her character is given the only arc in the movie. When it comes to the other actors in the film Lee, they are not on the same playing field as Kate Winslet. Closing statement, I don't think the downfall of Lee is that it's too traditional. I think the downfall of the movie is that it could have been better. Like, you see the potential of a better movie in there. You see the potential, you see the cast, and you go, well, surely they could have made a better film than the one that they came up with. And this is coming from someone who thinks Lee is a good movie. I think this is a good movie. But when you have a cast like this that includes Kate Winslet in a leading role, you should expect something other than just good. As for Kate Winslet, I'm someone who does believe she's one of the best actresses of her time and sometimes doesn't get celebrated as such. Winslet is next going to direct a film called Goodbye June, which she will also act in with Toni Collette, Johnny Flynn, Andrea Riseborough, Timothy Spall, and Helen Mirren. I mean, we are talking about an actress in Winslet who has been nominated for 7 Academy Awards. But she's only been nominated one time in the past decade, and that was in 2016 for Steve Jobs. And on paper, the movie Lee was a great choice for her to produce and star in. I think this was a great role for her. Unfortunately, I don't think the outcome was a great movie. I would have loved to live in a world where this was the best version of the film, where Winslet was nominated for an Oscar, but we don't live in that world. The movie is what it is, which is a good movie that I find to be flawed in a lot of ways. And it's really hard to say that the movie is going to have any lasting legacy, like it will be remembered in any way whatsoever. We'll just say, oh, that one time that Kate Winslet was in that biopic of Lee Miller, that's how it's going to be talked about. I don't see this movie getting a lot of eyeballs on it in the coming years. And even though I am a bit mixed on the movie, I hope I'm wrong about that. I want people to watch the movie Lee, not just because I just talked about it for 20 minutes, because I do think it's worthy of your attention. I do want to know about figures like Lee Miller, and I want to see Kate Winslet be given roles like this. And I also really do hope that Andy Samberg is given more opportunities to play dramatic roles, because I think he has more in him than what he shows in this film. And I think that has to do with the movie itself. I think Andy Samberg is really solid in the movie Lee, and I would really like to see him be given a leading role in a dramatic film. As a defender of biopics, I wanted to love the movie Lee, but sadly, I only liked it. It's a good movie that had the potential for greatness. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I recommend you check out the movie Lee. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about Scott Derrickson's The Gorge, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.